Hello, Algebra 1 students. Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to look at another way to solve a quadratic equation. Today's method is going to be by using factoring and the zero product property. In the last lesson, we looked at how to solve quadratics that did not have an x term. They only had x squareds and constants. Today, we're going to explore how to solve a quadratic if it does have an x term, like in this one, the 8x. We cannot just isolate the x because we have two different x terms. It makes it impossible to get x by itself. So instead, we are going to use something called the zero product property. What the zero product property says is that if you have two factors that when multiplied equal 0, then either A equals 0, B was equal to 0, or maybe it was both. We can use the zero product property with numbers or with polynomial factors. Let's look at an example of how you use it with polynomial factors. In this example, I have two factors, x plus 2 and x minus 3, and when multiplied, they equal 0. That means that either the first factor, x plus 2, was equal to 0, or the second factor, x minus 3, was equal to 0. If I solve each one individually, on this one, I would have to subtract 2 from both sides, and on this one, I would have to add 3 to both sides. My solutions will be x equals -2 and x equals 3. Therefore, the solutions are -2 and 3. Remember from last lesson that most quadratics do have two solutions. That is why I ended up with two solutions. Because of the zero product property, we can factor quadratics with an x term and use those factors to solve. Here are the 3 steps in order to use this method. First, make sure that the equation is equal to 0. Otherwise, you can't use the zero product property if it's not equal to 0. The second step is to factor the quadratic into two factors. And finally, set each of those factors equal to 0 and solve for x. Here's an example of a quadratic that I solved using factoring and the zero product property. In this equation, x squared plus 8x plus 12 equals 0. Notice that I have a squared and an x term. I'm going to have to factor. So make sure first that the equation is equal to 0. It is. That's good. We can start factoring. When I factor this quadratic, I get x plus 6 and x plus 2. Using the zero product property, that means either the first factor, x plus 6, was equal to 0, or the second factor, x plus 2, was equal to 0. I solved each equation, so I subtracted 6 from the first equation and got x equals -6, and I subtracted 2 on the second factor and got x equals -2. Remember, most quadratics have two solutions, so my solutions are x equals -6 and x equals -2. Let's look at one last example. Always start off by making sure that your equation says equals 0 so you can use the zero product property. Unfortunately, this one does not. It says equals 10. So in order to get that side to be a 0, I'm going to have to subtract 10 because 10 minus 10 is 0. So I will subtract 10 from both sides and get x squared minus 3x minus 10 equals 0. Now I can move on to factoring. This quadratic will factor to x minus 5, x plus 2. If I set each factor equal to 0, x minus 5 equals 0, I'd have to add 5 to both sides of that equation and x will equal 5. In the other one, x plus 2 equals 0, I would subtract 2 from both sides and x equals -2. Therefore, this quadratic has solutions 5 and -2. So just to recap, after this lesson, you should know what the zero product property means and how to use the zero product property to solve a quadratic by using its factor. If any of these are confusing, please review this lesson again.